I let my pregnant stepsister move in with us, and she tried to destroy my husband's career after he rejected her advances. But I found her old phone 2 months ago. Shannon, my stepsister, got divorced from her husband, Tobias, after 5 years of marriage. She told everyone that she caught him cheating with his co-worker and that he had been emotionally abusive throughout their marriage. The whole family was devastated for her, especially since she revealed she was 4 months pregnant right after filing for divorce. Shannon was living with a roommate in an apartment at the time, and she approached me about possibly staying with us temporarily. She said she could no longer afford the apartment rent since she had to pay for her lawyer and other divorce-related expenses. She said she was scared about being alone during her pregnancy. When I discussed this with David, my husband, he wasn't welcoming about the idea. He said Shannon always made him uncomfortable. I dismissed his concerns at the time. Shannon had always been nice to us at family gatherings. I convinced David that we needed to help family during tough times, especially given her situation. He reluctantly agreed, mostly to support my decision. The first few weeks after Shannon moved in were relatively peaceful. She kept to herself, stayed in her room most of the time, and seemed genuinely grateful for our help. She would even occasionally help with small household chores. But things started changing about a month into her stay. Shannon started wearing more revealing clothes around the house, especially when David was home. She would walk around in short nightgowns or tight workout clothes, which seemed odd given that she never used to dress that way. I also noticed she would frequently find reasons to be in whatever room David was in. If he was working in the home office, she suddenly needed to use the printer. If he was in the kitchen, she would get hungry at that exact moment. David started mentioning that Shannon was making him uncomfortable. He said she would make suggestive comments when I wasn't around, like asking if he ever thought about what it would be like with someone else, or saying how lucky I was to have such a handsome husband. She would also find excuses to touch him, brushing against him in the hallway, touching his arm while talking, or asking for help reaching things she could easily get herself. I hate to admit it, but I didn't take his concerns seriously enough. I thought he was being oversensitive and told him she was probably just being friendly. Last week, I decided to throw Shannon a baby shower. She had been talking about feeling sad that she wouldn't get to celebrate her pregnancy properly because of the divorce, so I wanted to do something nice for her. I invited family members and some of her close friends. The shower itself went well. Everyone seemed to have a good time. Shannon appeared happy, and there were no obvious issues. But everything fell apart the next day. Shannon posted a long message on social media claiming that David had been sexually harassing her throughout her stay with us. She said he would make inappropriate comments when I wasn't around, deliberately walk in on her in the bathroom, and try to touch her whenever possible. The worst part was her claim that during the baby shower, David had cornered her in the kitchen and tried to forcefully kiss her, stopping only when he heard someone coming. My family's reaction was immediate and brutal. My stepmom, Claire, called me screaming, saying she always knew there was something off about David and that she couldn't believe I had let a predator into our family. My dad sent me a text saying he was disgusted with both of us and needed time to process this. Shannon's friends started flooding David's social media with hateful messages, calling him a predator and threatening to report him to his school. David was completely devastated. As a teacher, these kinds of accusations could destroy not just his current job, but his entire career. He could barely speak when he showed me the emails he was getting. Some parents from his school had already seen Shannon's post and were demanding he be fired. I tried talking to Shannon, trying to understand what was happening. She broke down crying, saying she couldn't believe I was choosing my abuser over my pregnant sister. She said she had been afraid to tell me earlier because she knew I wouldn't believe her. Claire backed her up, telling me I was just as bad as David for not believing her pregnant daughter, who had already been through so much trauma with Tobias. The atmosphere in our house is unbearable now. David barely leaves our bedroom when Shannon is around, saying he's afraid she'll make more accusations. He suggested we ask her to leave, but my entire family is insisting that kicking out a pregnant woman would prove everything Shannon said about us. They say only monsters would throw out an expectant mother with nowhere to go. I'm completely lost. My husband is being destroyed by these accusations, but Shannon is still living in our house because we're afraid of making things even worse. David keeps saying we need to get her out before she makes more accusations, but my family will never forgive me if I do that. Shannon is supposedly due in 4 months and claims she has nowhere else to go. I don't know what the right thing to do is anymore. Am I the a-hole if I kick her out after everything happened? Update 1. After my last post, I spent several sleepless nights thinking about everything that had happened. Something about Shannon's story just wasn't adding up. The timing of her accusations, the way she had been acting before the baby shower, and most importantly, the complete contrast between her claims and the David that I've known for 7 years. I decided I needed to dig deeper. The hardest part was figuring out how to contact Tobias. Shannon had been very thorough in cutting him off from the family after their divorce. She had blocked him on all social media, deleted his contact from my phone years ago when she first started having problems with him, and made everyone promise not to maintain any contact with him. It took me 3 days of searching through old emails and finally reaching out to a mutual friend to get his current number. When I finally got hold of Tobias, his reaction to Shannon's accusations against David was completely unexpected. He wasn't angry or defensive. He just sighed deeply and said he should have spoken up sooner. What he told me next completely turned everything I thought I knew about their divorce upside down. According to Tobias, Shannon was the one who had been unfaithful, not him. She had been having an affair with his co-worker, Jake, for months before their divorce. Tobias had caught them together in their house one evening when he came home early from work with a migraine. That wasn't even the first time. He later discovered they had been meeting at Jake's apartment for weeks before that. But the real shock came when Tobias explained why he had kept quiet about all of this. Shannon had threatened to destroy his career if he exposed her infidelity. She said she would tell everyone at his workplace that he had been abusive, that she would make sure no one would ever believe his side of the story. Tobias works in corporate finance, where reputation is everything, and he couldn't risk those kinds of accusations. Tobias sent me a folder of evidence he had been keeping just in case. There were screenshots of text messages between Shannon and Jake dating back months before the divorce. There was security camera footage from their home showing Shannon sneaking Jake in while Tobias was at work. There were even emails where Shannon threatened to ruin Tobias if he ever told anyone about Jake. He said he had initially kept quiet about everything because of the pregnancy. Despite everything Shannon had done, he didn't want to stress her out and potentially harm the baby. But after hearing about what she was doing to David, he couldn't stay silent anymore. He said he felt partly responsible because his silence had allowed Shannon to maintain her image as the innocent victim. I spent an entire day going through all the evidence Tobias sent me. The messages between Shannon and Jake were explicit and left no room for doubt. They had been planning meetups, discussing their future together, even talking about how they would handle it when Shannon eventually left Tobias. It was all there in black and white. I confronted Shannon with everything I had found. I expected her to deny it or try to explain it away, but she completely broke down instead. Through her tears, she admitted that she had made up the accusations against David. She said she had developed feelings for him over the past few weeks. She said David was always so kind to her, always willing to help, and she thought they had a special connection. When she finally made a move on David, and he firmly rejected her, she got angry. She said she felt humiliated and wanted to hurt him like he had hurt her. She admitted she had planned the accusations carefully, waiting until after the baby shower when everyone would be paying attention to her social media. I recorded our entire conversation, hoping it would help clear David's name. But when I showed everything to my family, including Tobias's evidence and Shannon's confession, they still wouldn't believe us. Claire accused us of manipulating or bribing Tobias to lie. She said we must have threatened Shannon to get her to confess. My dad still isn't speaking to any of us. The worst part is that Shannon is still living here. Claire threatened to tell everyone we threw out a pregnant woman in her second trimester if we try to make her leave. She's been telling people we are trying to coerce her into changing her story. David is barely holding it together. Someone, and I strongly suspect it was Claire, sent anonymous emails to his school administration about Shannon's accusations. He had to attend a meeting with the principal and school board yesterday. Even though they haven't taken any action yet, he's terrified of losing his job. We're looking into legal options now, but our lawyer says defamation cases are difficult to prove. I feel horrible for not believing David's instincts about Shannon from the start. He knew something was off about her, but I dismissed his concerns. Now his reputation and career are at risk, and I can't help feeling like it's partly my fault for insisting we let Shannon move in with us. Update 2. The situation has gotten even more complicated over the past few weeks. Shannon is still living with us because of the constant pressure from my family. Last weekend, While helping her move some boxes in her room to make space for the baby furniture Claire bought her, I found her old phone tucked away in a shoebox. It was an iPhone she used before upgrading last year, and I remembered she had complained about losing it during her separation from Tobias. I know I shouldn't have invaded her privacy, but after everything that happened, I felt I needed to know the whole truth. The phone still had power, and Shannon had never changed her password. It was still her birth year. What I found on that phone made me feel sick to my stomach. There were dozens of inappropriate message threads with married men in our social circle, spanning the last 3 years. She had explicit conversations with our neighbor John's husband, Mike, my cousin Peter's husband, James, and even my friend Sarah's ex-husband, Tom. The messages showed a clear pattern. She would start with friendly texts, then slowly make them more suggestive, eventually sending inappropriate photos and trying to arrange meetups. The most shocking discovery was a series of messages with her previous roommate's husband, Mark. This was from the period when she first separated from Tobias and was living with her friend Amy. The messages showed Shannon had tried the exact same tactic she used with David. She flirted with Mark constantly. Then when he firmly rejected her, she started telling Amy that Mark was making her uncomfortable. The messages ended abruptly around the time Shannon had suddenly moved out of their place, claiming Amy and Mark were being mean to her. I spent hours taking photos of everything as evidence. I found messages where Shannon bragged to her friend about how easy it was to manipulate people into believing her stories. She joked about how she could always play the victim card and everyone would take her side. It was disturbing to see how calculated everything was. The most eye-opening conversation was with Sarah. I hadn't spoken to her much since her divorce 2 years ago. Sarah had always been vague about why she and Tom split up. When I reached out to her with what I had found, she broke down and told me everything. Shannon had managed to cause serious problems in their marriage during a period when she was staying with them after a fight with Tobias. Sarah had caught Shannon trying to kiss Tom, but when she confronted them, Shannon had turned it around and accused Tom of harassing her. Their marriage couldn't survive the stress and trust issues that followed. I also found messages proving that Shannon knew about Jake, Tobias's co-worker, long before the supposed cheating discovery. They had been planning their affair for months, and Shannon had even helped Jake create a fake email account to send anonymous tips to Tobias's workplace about his supposed misconduct. It was all part of their plan to discredit Tobias before he could expose their affair. The most recent messages on the phone were with Claire from just before Shannon moved in with us. They were discussing how Shannon could save money by staying with us, with Claire suggesting Shannon should play up the pregnancy angle to gain sympathy. There were even messages where they talked about how David seemed like an easy target because he was always trying to be nice to everyone. I showed everything to David, and he was both relieved and horrified. Relieved because we finally had solid proof of Shannon's pattern of behavior, but horrified at how long she had been manipulating everyone around us. We're documenting everything and have contacted our lawyer again. The evidence from the phone might help us fight back against her accusations. I haven't confronted Shannon about the phone yet. She hasn't even noticed it's missing from her old belongings. I'm gathering more evidence and trying to contact other people she's hurt before I make my next move. David thinks we should take everything directly to my dad, but I want to make sure we have the full picture first. Update 3. I finally hit my breaking point last week. After collecting all the evidence and speaking with several people Shannon had hurt over the years, I decided to confront everything head-on. My dad was hosting a family dinner to try to mediate the situation between all of us. He still wasn't talking to David directly, but he had started responding to my texts at least. I spent days organizing all the evidence. I had everything printed out. The messages from Shannon's old phone, Tobias's security camera footage, statements from Sarah and her former roommate Amy, and even messages from other victims who had reached out to me after hearing what happened. I also had a signed statement from Tobias explaining everything about their divorce and Shannon's affair with Jake. When we arrived at my dad's house, Shannon was already there with Claire. She was showing off her baby bump and talking about how stressful everything had been with David and me harassing her. Claire was hovering around her protectively, shooting dirty looks at David whenever he moved. Even my dad seemed uncomfortable with the tension in the room. I waited until everyone had finished eating. Shannon was in the middle of telling everyone how David and I were trying to force her to change her story when I stood up and placed the folder of evidence on the table. I started by playing the recording of Shannon confessing to lying about David. The look on everyone's faces as they heard her admit to making up the accusations because David rejected her was something I'll never forget. Then I showed them the messages from her old phone. The explicit conversations with married men, the plans she made with Jake while still married to Tobias, the messages where she bragged about manipulating people. I had everything organized chronologically, showing her pattern of behavior over the years. I even had statements from Mike's and James's wives about how Shannon had tried to cause problems in their marriages. Sarah was there too. I had asked her to come and share her story. She told everyone how Shannon had systematically tried to destroy her marriage, how she had twisted everything around to make herself look like the victim when Sarah caught her making advances on Tom. Amy shared her story via video call, explaining how Shannon had tried the same tactics with her husband, Mark. Shannon started crying immediately, trying to play the victim again, but this time I had too much evidence. When she tried to claim I was making everything up, I pulled out her old phone right there and showed everyone it was all real. She tried to grab the phone from me, which only made her look more guilty. Finally, after seeing everything, Shannon broke down completely. She admitted to everything. The lies about David, the affair with Jake, the false accusations against Tobias, all of it. She said she never meant for things to go this far. She just wanted attention after her marriage failed. She said she was jealous of how happy David and I were and how well respected he was in the community. The reaction from my family was intense. My dad was completely shell-shocked. He kept looking between Shannon and me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Several of our relatives left the room in disgust. Even Claire seemed stunned at first, though she quickly recovered and tried to defend Shannon. Claire started saying that we all drove Shannon to this by not being supportive enough during her divorce. She tried to blame Tobias for everything, saying if he had been a better husband, Shannon wouldn't have needed to seek attention elsewhere. When that didn't work, she tried to blame me for not being a better stepsister and understanding Shannon's needs. But the most surprising reaction came from my dad. He finally spoke up and told Claire to stop making excuses for Shannon. He said he had watched Claire enable Shannon's behavior for years, always finding ways to justify her actions and blame others. He apologized to David directly for not trusting him, saying he should have known better than to believe such serious accusations without proper evidence. Shannon left the dinner in tears, with Claire following her. Several family members have reached out to David and me since then to apologize for believing Shannon's lies. Some of them shared their own stories about times when Shannon had tried to cause problems in their relationships, but they had dismissed it as her being dramatic. The truth about the baby's father also came out during all this. It was Jake's child, not Tobias's like she had claimed. Tobias had known this all along, but kept quiet to protect her, which only made me feel worse about how we all treated him. Update 4. Shannon moved in with Claire last week after we finally told her she had to leave our house. She didn't put up much of a fight this time. I think she knew she had lost all leverage she previously had. The day she left, she tried one last time to play the victim, crying about how she had nowhere else to go, but David and I stood firm. Claire has been on a rampage ever since the family dinner. She keeps calling and texting everyone in the family, demanding that I apologize to Shannon for humiliating her publicly and destroying her reputation. According to Claire, I should have handled everything privately instead of exposing Shannon at the family dinner. She said I was cruel to embarrass a pregnant woman in front of everyone, and that I should have found a gentler way to address the situation. The irony of her demands isn't lost on me. She wants me to apologize to Shannon for exposing her lies, but sees nothing wrong with Shannon nearly destroying David's career with false accusations. Claire even tried to convince my dad that Shannon's pregnancy hormones were to blame for her behavior, and that we should all forgive her because she's going through a difficult time. Most of the extended family has completely cut ties with Shannon and Claire. My Aunt Maria, who initially was one of Shannon's strongest supporters, told Claire to stop calling her after she kept insisting that we were all being too hard on Shannon. Even my cousin Peter, who usually tries to stay neutral in family conflicts, blocked both of them on social media after Claire tried to minimize what Shannon had done to his marriage. My dad finally opened up to me about Shannon's past behavior. He admitted that there had been similar incidents in high school. Shannon had accused 2 different teachers of inappropriate behavior when they gave her poor grades, and Claire had always defended her. He said he regrets not seeing the pattern earlier and apologized again for doubting David. He's been trying to make amends by standing up to Claire and supporting us publicly. David's job is secure now that the truth is out. The school board formally dismissed all accusations after several people came forward to expose Shannon's history of false claims. Some parents who had initially demanded David's firing even wrote letters apologizing for believing the accusations without evidence. We're in the process of moving to a different neighborhood, not because we have to, but because we want a fresh start away from all the drama. We found a nice house closer to David's school, and my company has an office in that area where I can transfer. I haven't spoken to Shannon or Claire since the family dinner, and I don't plan to ever again. Some of Shannon's victims are considering legal action against her. Sarah and her ex-husband Tom are talking to a lawyer about filing a civil suit for the damage she caused to their marriage. Amy and Mark are also looking into their legal options. Even Tobias is reconsidering his decision to stay quiet about her false allegations at his workplace. Jake, the co-worker Shannon had an affair with, wants nothing to do with either Shannon or the baby. When everything came out, he apparently told her he never wanted a serious relationship and blocked her number. Claire is now telling everyone that Jake manipulated Shannon and took advantage of her vulnerable state during her marriage problems. Shannon is still living with Claire, playing the victim and telling anyone who will listen that we're all conspiring against her. She's been posting vague messages on social media about forgiveness and how people don't understand her struggles. Claire keeps supporting this narrative, commenting on every post about how strong Shannon is for surviving our abuse. The hardest part of all this isn't the moving or the family drama. It's knowing that my stepsister was willing to destroy my husband's life just because he rejected her advances. That kind of calculated malice isn't something I'll ever be able to forgive or forget. At least now everyone knows the truth, and David and I can finally move forward with our lives.